There is nothing I enjoy more than coming up with a fun, innovative, classic, dare I say, elegant design. And I think I've finally done that with this design today that I'm going to teach you. We're going to create a pendant that has a lot of sparkle and some techniques that you might be familiar with, and it's all going to be draped from silver silk. I want to welcome you to my channel. My name is Nilay Patel. I'm the owner, designer, and educator here at SilverSilk and more. My job is to bring you guys fun, exciting tutorials using my product SilverSilk. And I go over things quite, I guess, from a very beginner level standpoint and try and explain the most that I can within these videos. Now, if you're looking for more inspiration, you can follow me on Instagram, and you can also check out our Silkies Facebook group. And there we have quite a following, actually, of some Silver Silk enthusiasts that enjoy making designs and showing them in our group. And we welcome all the folks that want to create with us into our group. And before we get started with our tutorial, please give this video a giant thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you wish to see more of this sort of tutorial content. So let me pan down and, well, actually, let me show you the photo of the finished product first. And I'm going to pan down at my camera to show you this design up close and personal. So this is a design that I come up with and a technique system here to create this beautiful pendant. I like it because it's so reflective of my taste with geometry. Here I have a number of concentric circles and this little bar that goes across that kind of holds everything together. And I had mentioned earlier that it was all draped from silver silk. If you're not familiar with what silver silk is, in the simplest definition, silver silk is a knitted wire jewelry chain. My brand and company carries 6 different lines of silver silk chain. The chain that I'm showing you right now is called Capture Chain. It has a ball chain core on the inside, and then knitted on top of that is a wire sleeve, essentially. So if you can imagine wire as thin as human hair that is knitted by 6 needles around this ball chain, and you get this really extravagant and detailed texture with the design. It's just a really, I think, luxurious chain. It's got a beautiful drape. You can cut it and it doesn't fray. Some cording might do that. This chain doesn't. And I do also carry custom findings for silver silk. So in this case, we're going to be using single strand end caps for this type of chain, since it is part of our necklace. I also carry custom findings as far as lobster claws and some other types of basic findings that have the same exact plating as my end caps. This way you have the same silver color consistent across many different types of findings. Even the jump rings are in the same plated metal. And it is a very high quality plating, and the core of my findings are a brass material. So whenever you do crimp with these, that crimp is not going to be getting out anytime soon. So it is a very secure and high quality finish. Okay, so I want to recreate this design, but I want to use some other beads in the mix here because this one's kind of all put together. It's beautiful, and the idea of destructing it and then recreating it and it might not end up the same just kind of really makes me a little afraid. So I thought, you know what? I love this design and I bet it could be applied with other beads. I just need to kind of focus and put something special together. So we're going to learn this technique and the way to put it together, but we're going to do it with some other types of beads, just so you might not have these same exact beads, which came from Sam's Beads. But if you have something similar, I can guarantee that you can put this together pretty easily. So I'm going to set that aside, and I am going to show you where my new sets of beads came from. So I have here some beautiful, let's see, these are check glass Baroque cut Aqua Picasso, 8.5 millimeter. And this was on a strand previously, but I took them out. Here they are up close. Look at how gorgeous those are. And I'm a teal guy. Teal is my soul color along with green, if you really know me. And so anything water and teal just speaks to me. So I had to use these in today's design. Okay, this is really kind of where we want to start. This is going to be the interior part of my design here. So instead of using these really teeny tiny beads, I'm going to substitute them for this larger Picasso beads. This is where the customization can really just flourish, just depending on what materials you have. So my advice is start with your inner strand first, as well as having some test clips. You could use bead stoppers if you wanted to. That is absolutely possible. I just had these on hand, and I kind of like using them because they just keep the ends nice and tidy, and they're easy to unclip. And they're just called test clips. I unfortunately don't know where to get them. I got them locally here where I live, but maybe they can be Googled and found elsewhere on an online store. So start with your inner strand first. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of those. Next, I have these beautiful apatite beads. So a closer description, grade A apatite, smooth round, 8.5 millimeters, and this was a 12-piece strand, and I took one out. So here I've got 11 pieces of my apatite. Now that also part of my color palette, my personal color palette. I should also give you some advice on what to string this on, because I'm showing you the beads at this point, but let me go through the last set of beads and I'm going to tell you about what I strung them on. Okay, now this one, because we got our middle strand here all finished, this one is where you can really have some fun, because I wanted to mix up my materials. I decided to put this little guy together. And I'm going to start with the middle and then work my way out. So I have got, let's see, some hand-cut quartz, free-form variety of shapes and sizes. Now in this 6-piece set, I was lucky enough to find a few top-drilled beads here. And that might not always be the case, in which if you have some really interesting stones, you can always throw them on a head pin and just drape them down below here. But in this case, I'm just using some top drilled beads. In my original design, I had a top drilled bead, but it was needing a bail because the hole was all the way through. So I found a little bail and strung that on. In this case, I just strung this right through, and it happened to be top drilled, and it just worked out perfectly. So these little crystals in between each of those quartz beads, I have Precocia or Preciosa crystal bicone, 4 millimeter Colorado topaz. So these are 4 millimeter beads in bicone. Beautiful Colorado topaz, which is a brown, sort of transparent, lighter color. And I think that's just going to pair really well with the teal aqua blue color set. So I have that in between those. And then I've got some check glass Druck rounds. These are brown bear ombre crackle in 8 millimeter. So these are crackle glass beads. I've got those on either end. And then I have some check glass diamond bronze luster. This is 7 by 11 millimeter. So I've got some longer beads here on the side. And I just sort of created this really cool little pattern of some aqua on the side and then some white in the middle. So this design really is set to give your focus and attention toward the quartz crystal here at the bottom. And then as far as these, I just repeated my Picasso aqua. And then these smaller beads here are the check glass faceted rondelle sandy beach mixed in 5 by 7 millimeters. So that's these guys right here. And I'm going to hold this strand up now, actually. So you can see that I strung those there and then broke it up with my little aqua Picasso beads there, strung on another sandy beach bead, along with my luster. Let's see, what was this? The check diamond luster. So all in all, I've got a beautiful symmetrical strung set of beads here, and I could really just, string this on some SilverSilk and call it good, right? But that's not today. We're gonna do a real showstopper piece. Alrighty. Now, I really had to work to make sure that these lined up and were going to fall in the place that I wanted them to, that they were really going to stack. Depending on what beads and the size they are, you may have to kind of wiggle that a little bit to get it to the right calibration and making sure that it does lay into a nice straight line across the board here. I had to do that, in fact, with the original design here, just to make them fit accordingly. Now, a couple things that I wanted to also add were a little centerpiece. I have this on a head pin, and this is also from the same box. Check glass Moody heads, brown mix 11 by 13. And you can use any sort of focal you want to. I just thought that that was a really cool little design consideration and little addition that's going to work its way into the center. And then I'm going to use some crackle glass there at the top along with some wire. So let me explain all of this of what I'm stringing it on. I'm using Citrine Soft Flex beading wire, and this is the medium size, which means that it is 0.019 inch diameter. And I'm using a total of probably about 3 feet, give or take. You might not need that much. I like having the extra just in case. Along with that wire, I'm also going to use some 2mm crimps that are also from Softflex Company. And I'm going to need, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total of those. So I'm going to set those out to the side here. Perfect. And now I can sort of start to assemble this whole thing together. Here I've got my crackle glass ready to go. I'm going to need more, but I have it strung currently on some 20 gauge silver Softflex craft wire. I like using their craft wire because it's super soft and it's forgiving on my fingers in case I need to do some real wire working. But the 20 gauge is sturdy enough to hold all of this pendant and this design together. So I have cut about, probably about 10 inches of that and have sort of pre-strung my crackle glass here. The first thing I want to do is start with my centerpiece. So I want to go ahead and make a little simple loop using this head pin and my Moody face, if you will. So I'm going to grab a couple tools here. First is my chain nose plier. This is going to be used to create, well, actually to hold my piece as I create my round head pin, or excuse me, my round simple loop. So I'm going to have that out to the side, but I do want to have a pair of round nose pliers because that's going to form my simple loop. And I'm going to have a pair of cutters out here to the side. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and cut my head pin to be about a 1/2 inch of wire sticking up from the last bead. From there, I can actually go in with my round nose pliers, and I can start to kind of turn this end of my wire here until I get to this P-shaped loop. As you can see, I still have a little bit of a gap there because my loop doesn't touch that bead, and that's what I want it to do. So I'm just going to trim off a little bit more of my loop, and I'm going to continue to fold this in until it does touch that bead. As you can see now, it's much closer and perfect. So this is where our chain nose comes in play. I'm going to grab the neck or the base of my loop, and I'm just going to twist it back gently, and that's going to make my loop symmetrical. As you can see, my little loop opened up a little bit, so I'm going to go back in with my round nose pliers and just close it up to the best of my ability. And I can use my chain nose pliers to kind of work that end in if I need to a little bit more, and just to get everything nice and straightened up. So that looks pretty good, I must say. And now I can string that in between my crackle glass. Okay. sometimes it's a little difficult for me to see the hole in between there. There's so much crackling happening. Okay, that's gonna just hang out there for a little bit. What I'm gonna start with now is going ahead and creating my little simple crimps here at the ends of these. So I'm going to do a little crimped loop, and that's what's going to string onto my 20 gauge wire. So I pre-cut everything, probably more than I needed to, but that's all right. And I am using the citrine colored wire. I thought it was just a nice blend and color to add to this design. And I am using copper colored crimps and not silver. First, because I couldn't find my silver crimps. That's okay though. That's where design alterations and experimentation comes in play, right? The copper is kind of complementing the brown tones in this design. As you can see, there's very prevalent copper in the beads right there with the colors. So I'm not going to fret too much about using copper colored crimps. It goes with the design. It doesn't stick out. And I think it'll just disappear into the mechanics and beads. And that's what we want it to do. We don't want it to stick out and be distracting to the design. So I'm going to create a loop that's roughly about 4 millimeters at its inner diameter, as you could see there. So it's not exactly a very tight loop, but it's not huge either. So I vote for about, give or take, about 4 millimeters, if you can get it to that size. I'm going to grab my magical crimpers. These crimpers are perfect for creating a round crimp rather than a folded crimp. This works for the aesthetics of the design. I want my crimp to really disappear and become part of the design, so I'm going to create it to be nice and round and look like a spacer. And that's what these pliers are for. So I'm going to place it in the single divot that these pliers have, and I'm just going to press down. That's going to give me this little squarish looking crimp that's just happened. And what I can do then is just turn it on its side and start to crunch on that crimp until it starts to compress on itself and form a round little bead there. The crimp essentially crushes in on itself, so it's providing a very secure hold because it's crushed around the beading wire. But it also just looks aesthetically pleasing because it doesn't look like a folded crimp anymore. It looks like a spacer. So that looks really good to me, and I'm just going to go ahead and do that to the other side. I'm going to work a little faster this time because that was pretty much all I needed to explain for this one. The other thing you might consider is making sure that the drape of this is going to be really nice and round whenever you string this onto your craft wire. So whenever you do crimp this, you don't want to be super tight up against the beads when you're doing it. You want to make sure that when you lay this out, it's going to create a nice little round half arch there. So I'm going to just kind of scooch this down a little bit. Again, making sure that this is all nice and cozy and comfortable. So that looks really good. And I'm just going to keep that in placement as I sort of get this loop nice and small here. I'll check it a few more times just to make sure that it is falling correctly. It's a little bit loose, so that's okay. I can kind of push this down and just play with this until it works the way that I want it to. That looks really good. So I'm going to now just continue with my crimping. Okay, even if you don't hit it on the first time inside of that little notch that's in the crimp pliers, you can definitely keep going until it starts to form a round crimp as it looks like there. And then you could just trim off the ends. So that looks really good, and that gives me a really good drape. So I can go ahead and string this on. And I might have to work to the end of my wire here to get this to string, which I'm going to do there. This is going to look super cool, especially with all those colors coming together. Okay, so now I can take another crackle glass and string those in between my strands of beads. If you wanted to change stuff up on this bar that goes across, you can absolutely do that. There's no rules to this other than making it look pretty. It's the only rule. Should be the easiest one, right? Okay, that crackle glass had a little piece of glass stuck in it, so I'll have to burr it out later. But for now, we'll just use a different crackle glass. There we go. Okay, that looks really good. I am ready for my second row now. Okay, so let me get this all out. Clean up my little station here. And I'll just do this crimp row swiftly. Okay, I can actually fit my and part of my wire there to fit right inside my crimp, so I don't have to trim anything, at least on this first part. Okay, that looks really good. Just gonna go ahead and crimp this. Once you get the hang of this crimping, it is so easy and very satisfying. Alrighty, let's do the second side together. Okay, the drape of that looks really good, so I just need to tighten this. Always hold it into a little circle if you can, or a half circle. You just never know if you're working in such a linear way, if I'm working up and down, that it's going to look correctly. So you definitely want to crimp in the direction that the flow of your beads is going to go. And I think that really does apply to your necklace designs as well. It goes around the neck, of course, so you want to make sure that whenever you do that, that you have it according to the form, so that way it's not super tight and compressed and doesn't bow correctly. Okay, and I am a perfectionist, so I just wanted to make sure that that looked correct. Okay, so I'll just crimp that. And then I'll trim, and then I will string. Beautiful. Look at that. Coming along quite beautifully. All right, time to get this last one done. Wonderful. Okay, so string this one on. And then I'll just crimp. Perfect. Excellent. So I'll do the other side now. I'm so excited about this design, you guys. It's so pretty. Tightening on the last one is a little tricky, I will say. What I recommend doing is maybe grasping the core wire, and that way you can kind of pull on the tail wire there to get it to fit inside of that crimp and pull correctly. Again, I just want to pick it up a few times, make sure that this is all nice and aligned. That looks really good, and I'm getting a very like loose, not loose maybe, but just a very flexible fitting there. And so now I can crimp it. this is exactly the same techniques that I used for creating the original design too. Of course, again, my beads were just different, so it just took me a little longer to string the different sets of beads, but otherwise pretty much the same. All right, so back to our set of crackle glass. Let's see if I can string this. Whoops. And now I can string one side of my necklace here, and then onto the second side. Beautiful. Excellent. So let's hold everything up, make sure that it all fits and falls perfectly. It's a little heavy, but until I get it all like nice and secured, it's perfect. Oh my gosh, look at that. I did say show stopping, didn't I? Awesome. So now we can go ahead and create our loops on the ends here. So to do this, I'm going to carefully move this to one end to begin with. And I'm just going to use a couple of my test clips to hold it in place. You can use, of course, bead stoppers, which might actually be a little bit more secure than those test clips that I'm using. That's all right. Okay, let me move some of this stuff out of the way. To do the ends here, quite easy. I'm going to go into the middle of my round nose pliers. These loops are a bigger size, and so the deeper you go into your pliers, the bigger the loop becomes. But I just kind of want it in the center there. That's going to be just big enough. And I want to make sure I have about a couple inches of extra wire sticking out there. I'm going to loop it around and have it come to a perpendicular angle. So now I just basically wrap that entire wire around one of the plier mandrels here, and I have it sticking out toward me. I want to leave this as it is. I want this loop to stick up whenever it is going to be strung on or attached to SilverSilk. And I want to take the rest of this wire and, well, not the rest of it really, but just the remaining wire to create a couple of loops, or coils actually, around the stem of my wire. Once I've done that, I can then trim and make sure to tuck in this end. And that's just going to create a nice little clean finish at the end of my pendant here. And I'm going to do the same thing to this other side while all my beads are in place. So that really is probably the most tricky part of this design, is getting this to lay correctly as you're doing it. But that's okay. We can do it together. And in this immediate moment, it doesn't even matter which way your wire is facing, because we can clean that all up at the end. Again, I just want to loop this around, have it come toward me. If you have a little bit of an extra gap, you can either do an extra coil with your wire or just kind of loop it back in as I just did. But I think actually I got it on the right sweet spot there. Okay, I'm going to grab it with my chain nose pliers, and I'm just going to coil the remaining wire around a couple times around the stem. Really, 2 or 3 coils is pretty much the magic number. Okay, that looks really good. So I'm just going to trim it, making sure that I don't accidentally cut my beading wire. And you can take that little stem there and just coil it in so that it doesn't poke out. It'll want to turn. It's going to want to turn on you. But don't worry about it. Just keep going. Do the best you can. Make sure that your coils are nice and tight. Now, as you can see, my loops are kind of wonky. So I'm just going to twist them to get them to face the same direction now. And I have got my pendant built. So what I can do now, making sure that it all lays nice and flat, what I can do now is attach my SilverSilk, as I did here. So what I need are 4 single-strand end caps. Typically, these are sold in pairs, so really you just need 2 packages of them. Just my little lobster claw set. And of course, I need some SilverSilk in silver color. And I went ahead and pre-cut these into a 10-inch length. You can, of course, use more or less just depending on how tight you want your necklace to be. So you will need a pair of wide nose pliers that have been dipped in Tool Magic. Tool Magic is a type of material that you dip your pliers into to give it a rubberized coating. This rubberized coating protects the plier and the finding from abrasion. It kind of protects the finding more or less from getting any sort of nicks and scars or marks within plier usage. And it also gives a really good grip on your finding. So these will be very handy for using with the end caps. Along with that, I'm just going to have my cutters out because if I need to trim the SilverSilk, I can do that now. But I want to make sure that these are going to be the same length. It's just barely a little bit off. So I'm just going to trim that at the end there. Perfect. The other thing I want to have handy are my chain nose pliers. So what I can do is place it into my finding and just open them up a smidge more. 1 or 2 millimeters of opening it up more makes a huge difference in the crimping. It just is a little bit more comfortable. And the wider channel just makes it easier to insert, makes your chain easy to insert into that channel. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to each end here. So this finding doesn't require any sort of special glue or tools other than the wide nose pliers dipped in Tool Magic. It is easy because all you do is just push the SilverSilk into the channel of the crimp and you just press it flat and make sure that that seam is nice and closed right over the SilverSilk, and it is really, truly that easy. So I'm going to continue doing that to the last strand here. One thing you want to note is when you lay your SilverSilk flat on the tabletop here, just make sure that the side with the SilverSilk imprint is facing the same direction. It might look like a mistake or something that was just overlooked if the findings were sort of staggered and didn't lay correctly. So I just like to put that little extra bit of detail into my design and making sure that everything is nice and really intentional with the design. So all of this lays correctly. And at this point, I can kind of just assemble everything together. I do have some smaller jump rings here that I used in my original design, so I'm going to dump a few of those out. And I'm going to use these to connect my end cap to my created wire wrapped loops here. Okay, and I think I'm going to need the assistance of my other pliers here to connect everything. These jump rings are about 3 millimeters, so they're pretty tiny. But that's all right. That'll give it some extra security, right? I'm going to attach 3 of these on the same attachments here, on the same end cap. And that extra reinforcement will be quite nice. And it also, because they're so small, resembles the coils that I made earlier in my wire wrap loops there. Okay, here we go. And I may have to open this up a little bit wider because it's not quite going through. But that's okay. Try again. There we go. Kind of just have to work with it until it starts to fit. So that is a nice secure hold. And I'm going to do the same thing to all of these. Well, except for the two ends there. I have bigger jump rings for that side where the clasp is, and that's going to be much easier to put on. And you can also use smaller chain nose pliers for some of this delicate work. So far, this seems to be okay, though. Moving along quite nicely here. There's 1 and 2. Perfection. And 3. That third one's a little tricky, but don't worry, we'll get it. There we go. Perfect. Alrighty, so those are all attached, and my SilverSilk imprint is facing on the top side there. And now I can just use my regular jump rings that come with the lobster claw to attach my end piece here, my clasp. Of course, you could use a toggle too if you wanted to be decorative about it. That's totally your preference, but otherwise the technique is pretty much the same. Okay, there we go. Beautiful. I have it all assembled, and that looks really stellar. I've got that cool little face in there as well, and it is a showstopper piece. Beautiful stuff, though. I'm really, really digging this design. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. We spent a little extra time going over all the fine details, but really that was just for you to be able to really construct the best design that you can possibly do. So I hope you'll take some of the learning and the foundations of this design and apply it to what you guys do. If you're looking for more inspiration and where to find some more of my designs and work, please follow me on Instagram. You can also find a giant library on my YouTube channel, so I hope you'll give other videos a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you want to see even more of this content. The last place you can check me out is the Silky SilverSilk Facebook group. And oh, actually one other thing, you can also sign up for text notifications from SilverSilk. So I hope you leave this tutorial inspired, invigorated, and just excited to create, because that's my mission. Again, I'm Nilay Patel. I'm the owner, designer, and educator at SilverSilk and more, and I will see you guys at the next tutorial. Bye.